They say a man's character shows in how he treats the powerless. I learned mine the day my own son threw me away like yesterday's sawdust. I'm Henry A. Hank Monroe, 75 years old, and I've built things that lasted longer than most marriages. Houses that stood through hurricanes. Cabinets that outlived their owners. A legacy that should have meant something. But legacy, I discovered, is only as strong as the people you leave it to. This is the story of how I lost everything I'd built in a single morning, and how I got it all back in a single evening. It's about the difference between inheritance and legacy, between taking and earning, between the sound of a door slamming shut and the quiet click of one closing true. If you're listening from somewhere tonight, tell me where you are in the comments. And if you believe that dignity and legacy outlast convenience and greed, hit that subscribe button. Because this story isn't just mine, it's for everyone who's ever been counted out too soon. Let me take you back to where it started. In my workshop, where the scent of cedar still lingered and every tool had its place. The workshop behind my Atlanta home smelled like 40 years of honest work. Cedar shavings curled on the concrete floor like questions marks, each one a whisper of something I'd built with these hands. My grandfather's plane sat on the workbench where I'd left it the night before, sharp, true, ready for one more project. Ruth's rocking chair sat in the corner, the one I'd made for her when Jason was just a baby. White oak with a grain like flowing water, joints so tight they'd never need glue. She used to sit there while I worked, humming hymns and watching me measure twice, cut once. Would remembers, she'd say, running her fingers along the armrest. So do hearts. Ruth had been gone 3 years now, but the chair still rocked slightly when the AC kicked on, like she was keeping me company through the long evenings. The front door of our house, my house, hung perfectly in its frame. No squeaks, no sticking. I'd rehung it myself just last month because a door that closes true tells you something about the man who hung it. This was legacy. Not the square footage or the property value that Jason talked about when he visited. Not the equity or investment opportunity his wife Lauren saw when she walked through with those calculating eyes. Legacy was the promise I'd made to Ruth that this place would always be home. That the work of our hands would outlast us both. I should have known that promise was in danger when Jason started talking about options and what's best for everyone. When Lauren began mentioning senior communities and appropriate care levels over Sunday dinners that grew shorter and more strained each week. But I was 75, not dead. My hands were steady, my mind sharp as the blade on that old plane. I could still smell when the cedar was ready to cut, still hear when a joint sang true. I thought that counted for something. I was about to learn how wrong I was. Dad, we need to talk. Jason stood in my kitchen on a Tuesday morning in March, wearing that corporate smile he'd perfected in his marketing job. All teeth, no warmth. Lauren flanked him like backup, her manicured nails drumming against her designer purse. About what? I was drinking coffee from the mug Ruth painted in '82, yellow flowers on white ceramic, handle worn smooth by 20,000 mornings. Your health, Dad. We're worried. Lauren's voice carried that practiced concern they teach in management seminars. When's the last time you had a real checkup? I'm fine. That's what everyone says until they're not. Jason sat across from me, leaning forward like he was about to close a deal. Look, we've scheduled an appointment with Dr. Paul Richardson. Just to make sure everything's running smooth. For our peace of mind. The coffee tasted bitter suddenly. I didn't ask for your peace of mind. Dad, please. Lauren touched my shoulder, light, calculated. We love you. We just want to know you're okay. It's one appointment. Something in their timing felt wrong. The way they'd coordinated this ambush, the way neither would meet my eyes directly. But Ruth always said I saw conspiracy where others saw care. Maybe she was right. The ride to the doctor's office was quiet. Jason drove while Lauren scrolled through her phone, occasionally showing him something that made them share those married couple looks. I watched Atlanta blur past the window and thought about the morning I'd planned, finishing the jewelry box for Mrs. Parker down the street, the one with the secret compartment she didn't know about yet. Dr. Paul Richardson was younger than my workshop apron and had the soft hands of someone who'd never built anything more complex than a PowerPoint presentation. He poked and prodded, asked about my diet, my sleep, my support system at home. Everything looks good, Mr. Monroe, he said finally. Blood pressure's a little high, but nothing concerning for a man your age. I'd recommend some light exercise, maybe consider how much independence is realistic as you continue aging. That phrase, continue aging, hung in the air like sawdust after a bad cut. What does that mean? I asked. But Jason was already standing, shaking the doctor's hand. Thanks, document. We'll discuss the options. Options. That word again. We didn't go home. Jason pulled into the parking lot of Sunset Manor, a brick building with too many windows and the kind of landscaping that screamed institutional care. My stomach dropped like a hammer hitting the floor. What are we doing here? Dad, Lauren's voice was gentle now, the way you'd talk to a confused child. We think this might be best. Just temporarily while we figure things out. Figure what out? The house is too big for you now, Jason said. The maintenance, the stairs, being alone all the time. This place has activities, people your age, medical staff if something happens. I looked at the building, then at my son. You planned this? We planned to keep you safe. By lying to me? By doing what needed to be done. His voice had an edge now, the mask slipping. Dad, you're 75. You live alone in a house that's falling apart, you spend all day in that workshop breathing sawdust and playing with sharp tools. What if you fall? What if you have a stroke? Who's going to find you? I'm not moving into a nursing home. It's not a nursing home, Lauren said quickly. It's assisted living. There's a difference. But there wasn't, and we all knew it. I want to go home. Jason pulled out my car keys. When had he taken them from my pocket? And handed them to Lauren. Dad, we've already talked to the administrators. They're expecting you. Your room is ready. The betrayal hit like ice water. You can't do this. We're your family, he said. We can do whatever keeps you safe. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. I just looked at my son, this stranger wearing Jason's face, and said, Wood remembers, son. So do I. Then I walked into that building and let them process me like lumber through a mill. Room 237 smelled like disinfectant and other people's endings. Beige walls, beige furniture, a window that looked out onto a courtyard where old men shuffled in circles like broken clockwork. They gave me a plastic bracelet with my name and room number, like I might forget who I was or where they'd put me. I didn't call them that first night. Didn't beg or argue or make the scene they were probably expecting. Instead, I sat in the vinyl chair by the window and listened to the building settle around me. The hum of fluorescent lights. The distant murmur of television programs. The soft shuffle of slippers on linoleum. This wasn't grief. Grief was what I'd felt when Ruth died, that hollow ache that carved you out from the inside. This was something colder. Cleaner. This was the moment when you realize you've been measuring wrong all along, and now it's time to start over. A knock on my door broke the silence. Mr. Monroe? A woman's voice, soft but not weak. I'm Emily, one of the night nurses. Thought I'd check on you. She was maybe 40, with kind eyes and the steady hands of someone who'd seen enough to know the difference between helping and hovering. How are you settling in? Like sawdust and water, I said. She smiled at that. My grandfather was a carpenter too. Used to say the same thing when something didn't fit right. She sat in the chair across from me, not the hovering stance most staff used, but settling in like she had time. Want to talk about it? Nothing to talk about. Yeah. She was quiet for a moment, then, I've worked here for years. Seen a lot of families make a lot of decisions. Some of them are harder than others. Some of them are wrong. That too. She stood but not rushed. Mr. Monroe, I don't know your situation, and it's not my business. But I've learned that sometimes the quietest people are the ones planning the loudest comebacks. If you need anything, and I mean anything, you let me know. After she left, I lay in the narrow bed and thought about tools. Every carpenter knows that the right tool for the job isn't always the biggest or the sharpest. Sometimes it's the smallest, the most precise, the one nobody sees coming. I thought about power of attorney documents and property deeds. About the difference between being old and being powerless. About the sound a well-hung door makes when it closes, not a slam, but a quiet final click. By morning I had a plan. Not revenge, that was too crude, too much like swinging a sledgehammer when you needed a finishing nail. This would be restoration. Setting things back to true. But first I needed an ally. Mark Turner had an office that smelled like leather and old books, the kind of place where serious business got done by people who understood the weight of words. I'd found his name in the yellow pages, yes, I still used those, and called from the payphone in Sunset Manor's lobby. Old school, but old school worked. Mr. Monroe, he said, gesturing to a chair across from his mahogany desk. You sounded urgent on the phone. Mark was maybe 50, with silver threading through his dark hair and the kind of steady presence that came from years of fighting other people's battles. His handshake was firm without being showy, his eyes the kind that missed nothing. My son put me in a nursing home and took my house, I said. No preamble, no sugarcoating. I want it back. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Tell me everything. I did. The deception, the fake checkup, the keys disappearing from my pocket. The way they'd talked about our options and what's best while planning to warehouse me like defective merchandise. When I finished, Mark was quiet for a long moment. Do you have any existing power of attorney documents? I signed something years ago. Basic stuff, Ruth insisted on it after her heart attack. Medical decisions if I couldn't make them myself. But not financial? Never saw the need. Mark made a note. That's actually good news. Limited POA means they can't touch your property or finances without going to court. And abandoning you in a care facility without proper legal guardianship. He shook his head. That's kidnapping, Mr. Monroe. Elder abuse. We could have them arrested. I don't want them arrested. I want my house back. Why not both? I thought about that. About Jason as a boy, helping me in the workshop, his small hands learning to sand with the grain. About the Christmas mornings and birthday parties and all the times I'd carried him on my shoulders through the hardware store. About Ruth's face when he graduated college, the pride that lit her up like sunrise. Because he's still my son, I said finally. Stupid doesn't make him evil. Greedy doesn't make him worthless. Mark nodded like he understood. Then we do this clean. Legal. By the book. He pulled out a legal pad and started writing. First, we establish your mental competency, get you examined by an independent physician. Then we execute new power of attorney documents that revoke any previous grants. After that, we look at your property situation. They're living in my house. And without legal right. That makes them trespassers. He looked up from his notes. Mr. Monroe, how much do you know about life estates? Nothing. It's a legal structure that lets you retain ownership and control of your property while designating who inherits it after you die. You keep what's called a life estate, the right to live there, make decisions, sell if you choose. They get what's called a remainder interest, they inherit only after you're gone. I felt something shift in my chest like a joint clicking into place. And if I sell the house? The remainder interest disappears. They inherit nothing but air. Mark smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. How would you feel about turning your property into a scholarship fund? That's when I knew I'd found the right ally. Dr. Sarah Pennington had the kind of thoroughness that reminded me of measuring twice. She spent 3 hours with me the next day, testing everything from my reflexes to my ability to remember 3 words after 5 minutes of conversation. Cognitive function, she called it. I called it proving I wasn't the doddering old fool my son thought I was. Mr. Monroe, she said, reviewing her notes, your cognitive function is excellent for a man of any age. Your physical health is good, with minor age-related changes that don't impact your daily functioning. In my professional opinion, you have full capacity to make your own decisions regarding housing, finances, and medical care. She signed the competency evaluation with a flourish. Whatever brought you here, it wasn't medical necessity. Back at Mark's office, we spread the paperwork across his conference table like blueprints for a complex project. The old power of attorney documents were simpler than I'd remembered, just medical decisions and basic financial management in case of emergency. Nothing that gave Jason the right to sell my house or commit me anywhere. This is interesting, Mark said, studying the nursing home admission papers. They listed themselves as your legal guardians, but there's no court order establishing guardianship. They forged this signature line here. He pointed to a scrawled Henry Monroe that looked nothing like my actual handwriting. What does that mean? It means they committed fraud. Document fraud, elder abuse, false imprisonment, we could bury them in criminal charges. He set the papers down. But you said you want this clean. Clean but thorough. Mark pulled out fresh documents. A comprehensive durable power of attorney, naming me as your agent for all financial and legal matters. This revokes any previous grants and requires your explicit written consent for any major decisions. They won't be able to touch your property, your bank accounts, or make any decisions about your care. I signed my name carefully, the way Ruth taught me to sign important documents. Full signature, not initials. Date and time. Witnessed and notarized. And now, Mark said, let's talk about your house. The property records showed what I already knew, the house was mine, free and clear. Paid off in 1998 with money from a big renovation contract, title in my name only. But there were some recent inquiries on the record. Someone had been asking about liens, encumbrances, market value. They've been shopping it, Mark said. Probably getting appraisals, talking to realtors. Planning to sell once they figured out how to get you out of the picture permanently. The betrayal stung fresh, but it also clarified things. This wasn't about my safety or their concern. This was about $400,000 in real estate equity and a son who'd learned to see his father as an obstacle to overcome. Here's what we're going to do, Mark said, pulling out more paperwork. We're going to file a life estate deed that establishes your absolute right to live in and control that property for the rest of your natural life. Then we're going to sell it. Sell it? To a buyer I'll arrange. Cash sale, quick close. The money goes into an irrevocable trust that you control, with the remainder designated for a scholarship fund in your wife's name. They can't touch the money, can't contest the trust, can't claim any inheritance. The plan crystallized in my mind like a joint coming together. When? 2 weeks. I'll need time to arrange the buyer and set up the trust. Mark smiled. When do you want to serve them with notice to vacate? I thought about timing. About the social media posts Lauren was always making. About the way they'd been talking about redecorating and making it ours during their visits. They're planning a housewarming party, I said. Next Saturday. Posted about it on Facebook, sent invitations to all their friends. Mark's smile turned sharp. Perfect. Nothing like a public audience for a private humiliation. Back in room 237, I laid out the strategy like I was planning a complex cabinet build. 3 moves executed in sequence, each one dependent on the last. Measure twice, cut once. Then cut once more away from the rot. Move 1, execute the new power of attorney and revoke all previous grants. Mark would file the paperwork Monday morning, officially stripping Jason and Lauren of any legal authority over my affairs. They'd get notification by certified mail Tuesday, but by then it would be too late to stop what came next. Move 2, file the life estate deed and list the house for cash sale. Mark had a client looking for investment property, someone who'd buy sight unseen for a quick close. The money would go directly into the Ruth Monroe Educational Trust, administered by the local community college for scholarships in fine arts and traditional crafts. They'd inherit nothing but the memory of their greed. Move 3, time the notice to vacate for maximum impact. Saturday evening, during their housewarming party, with all their friends and neighbors watching. Not revenge restoration. Setting things back to true in front of the people whose opinions they valued most. It's aggressive, Mark had said. They'll fight it. Let them fight. Fighting requires standing on solid ground. The beauty of it was the timing. By the time they received the certified mail Tuesday, the new POA would already be filed. By the time they could contact a lawyer, the life estate would be recorded and the sale would be in escrow. By the time they realized what was happening, they'd be standing in my house, their former house, with a sheriff's deputy and a notice to vacate. But first, I had to play the part they expected. The confused old man, grateful for their attention, slowly accepting his fate. It wouldn't be easy, every instinct screamed to confront them, to demand explanations, to fight back immediately. But the best carpenters know that sometimes you have to work with the grain, even when the grain runs crooked. Emily knocked on my door Thursday evening. How are you settling in, Mr. Monroe? Like sawdust and water, I said, but this time I was smiling. She studied my face. You look different tonight. Lighter. Sometimes a man needs to remember who he is before he can figure out what he's going to do. And what are you going to do? I thought about Ruth's rocking chair, probably pushed into a corner now or sold at a yard sale. About my workshop, maybe converted into Lauren's yoga studio or home office. About the front door I'd hung so carefully, now opening for strangers who didn't understand what it meant to build something that lasted. I'm going to build something, I said. A one last project? The most important one. Emily nodded like she understood. Need any help? Just keep an eye on the news Saturday night. I think you'll find it interesting. They visited me Friday afternoon, bringing flowers and guilt in equal measure. Jason wore his weekend casual, khakis and a polo shirt that probably cost more than my first toolbox. Lauren had her sympathy face on, the one she'd practiced for difficult client meetings. Dad, you look good, Jason said, settling into the visitor's chair like he was doing me a favor. How are you adjusting? It's fine, I said, keeping my voice flat, defeated. Quiet. That's good. Quiet is good for healing. Lauren patted my hand with her manicured fingers. Are you eating? Making friends? Some. They exchanged that look again, the married couple telepathy that said their plan was working perfectly. The old man was broken, compliant, accepting his fate. We wanted to update you on the house, Jason said carefully. We're having some people over tomorrow night. Just a small gathering, nothing fancy. We thought you should know. Your house now, I said. Dad, it's still your house. We're just taking care of it. Making sure it doesn't sit empty. His voice carried that practiced sincerity that made my teeth ache. Would you like to come? We could arrange transportation. The invitation was perfect, condescending enough to sting, public enough to humiliate, timed exactly right for what I had planned. But I couldn't let them see how perfect it was. I don't think so. Too tired. Of course. Of course, Dad. You rest. Lauren squeezed my shoulder. Maybe next time. They left after 20 minutes, duty visits completed. I watched from my window as they walked to Jason's BMW, my car keys still in his pocket, my house keys on Lauren's keychain. They were laughing about something, heads together like conspirators. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark, everything filed. Buyer confirmed. Sheriff's Department briefed for peacekeeping tomorrow at 7 p.m. You ready for this? I typed back carefully with arthritic fingers. Wood remembers. So do I. That evening, I sat in the common room and watched the other residents play cards and complain about the food. Most of them were here legitimately, bodies failing, minds fading, families genuinely unable to provide the care they needed. But some, I realized, were here for the same reason I was. Inconvenient. Expensive. In the way of someone else's plans. Mrs. Parker from 3 doors down had been here 6 months. Her daughter lived in California and visited twice a year, always talking about how much she missed her mother while calculating the cost of keeping her alive. Mr. Williams had been here since his wife died, not because he couldn't live alone but because his son wanted to rent out the family house. We were all sawdust and water, floating until someone decided we'd settled enough to sweep away. But tomorrow, I was going to show them what happened when sawdust remembered how to be wood. Saturday evening came dressed in Georgia spring, warm air thick with the promise of rain, dogwood blossoms white as Ruth's Sunday dress. I sat in the back seat of Mark's Lexus, wearing my best suit and the tie Ruth bought me for our 40th anniversary. The buyer, a pleasant woman named Sarah who ran a property management company, sat beside me reviewing the final paperwork. You sure about this, Mr. Monroe? She asked. It's a beautiful house. Lot of memories. Memories aren't in the walls, I said. They're in here. I tapped my chest. The house is just wood and nails. Wood can be replaced. We pulled up to my street at exactly 7 o'clock. Cars lined both sides, BMWs and Audis and the kind of SUVs that never saw dirt. Through the windows, I could see the party in full swing. My living room filled with strangers, my kitchen counter covered with catered food, my backyard hosting people who'd never met me but were celebrating in my space. The sheriff's deputy was already there, parked discreetly around the corner. Officer Kelly Harris, a young woman with serious eyes and the kind of presence that commanded respect without demanding it. Mark had briefed her thoroughly. This was a civil matter, property dispute, potential for emotional escalation but no violence expected. You ready, Mr. Monroe? Mark asked. I looked at the house I'd called home for 37 years. The front porch I'd rebuilt after Hurricane Isabel. The flower beds Ruth had planted and replanted every spring. The workshop behind the house where I'd learned the difference between building something and creating something. I'm ready. We walked up the front steps, Mark, Sarah, Officer Harris, and me. The sounds of laughter and conversation spilled through the door, along with music I didn't recognize and the clink of wine glasses. Through the window, I could see Jason holding court by the fireplace, probably telling the story of how he'd saved his father from dangerous independence. Mark knocked on the door. My door. The one I'd hung myself, with joints so tight they'd never sag and hardware that would last 100 years. Lauren answered, wine glass in hand, smile bright as fresh paint. The smile faltered when she saw us. Dad? What are you doing here? How did you? Mrs. Monroe, Mark said formally. I'm Mark Turner, attorney for Henry Monroe. We need to speak with you and your husband immediately. The party noise dimmed as people sensed drama brewing. Jason appeared behind Lauren, his face cycling through confusion, annoyance, and the first flicker of genuine concern. Dad, what's going on? Who are these people? The party noise dimmed as people sensed drama brewing. Jason appeared behind Lauren, his face cycling through confusion, annoyance, and the first flicker of genuine concern. Dad, what's going on? Who are these people? I stepped forward, and for the first time in weeks, I let my full presence show. Shoulders back, voice clear, eyes steady as the day I'd first walked through this door as a young man with a new wife and unlimited dreams. Son, I said, before you pour any more champagne, there's one last thing we need to discuss about this house. The living room fell silent except for the soft jazz playing from speakers I didn't recognize. 30-some people, Jason's work colleagues, Lauren's book club friends, neighbors who'd known me for decades, all turned to watch the old man who'd appeared at his own wake. "Dad, you're confused," Jason said, but his voice carried a tremor I'd never heard before. "This isn't the time or place." Actually, son, this is exactly the time and place." I pulled out the folder Mark had prepared. "See, I've been doing some reading lately. Learning about power of attorney laws, property rights, elder abuse statutes. Fascinating stuff." Lauren set down her wine glass with shaking hands. "Henry, maybe we should discuss this privately. Privacy's what got us here in the first place." I opened the folder, papers crisp as fresh-cut lumber. "Mark, would you explain to my son and his wife what these documents mean?" Mark stepped forward, every inch the professional advocate. "Mr. and Mrs. Monroe, these are legal notices. First, a revocation of any previous power of attorney grants, filed with the county clerk's office Monday morning. Second, a life estate deed establishing Mr. Henry Monroe's absolute right to control this property, filed Tuesday. Third, a bill of sale transferring ownership to Miss Sarah Collins here, effective immediately upon closing, which occurred at 4 o'clock this afternoon." The silence stretched like a held breath. Then Jason laughed, sharp, disbelieving. "That's impossible. Dad doesn't have a lawyer. He can't even remember to take his medications." "I remember everything that matters," I said quietly. Including the day you lied to me about a doctor's appointment so you could dump me in a nursing home and steal my house." "We didn't steal anything." Lauren's voice cracked like greenwood under stress. "We were protecting you." "From what? Living in my own home? Making my own decisions? Being inconvenient to your plans?" I looked around the room at their friends, these people who'd been celebrating in my space. "Did they tell you how I ended up in that nursing home? Did they mention the fake medical emergency, the keys disappearing from my pocket, the forged guardianship papers?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Henderson from next door looked stricken. Bob from the hardware store was staring at Jason like he'd never seen him before. "You don't understand," Jason said desperately. "Dad, you're 75 years old. You live alone, you spend all day with dangerous tools. What if something happened? What if you fell? We were trying to keep you safe." "By throwing me away?" "By getting you proper care. In a place I never chose, surrounded by strangers, while you moved into my house and planned to sell it?" I felt the anger rising but kept my voice level. "Measure twice, cut once. Son, I built this house with these hands. I carried your mother over this threshold. I raised you in these rooms. And you threw all of that away for square footage and equity." Officer Harris stepped forward. "Mr. and Mrs. Monroe, I need to inform you that you're currently trespassing on private property. The new owner has requested that you vacate immediately." "This is insane." Jason spun toward Sarah. "Lady, I don't know what he's paying you, but this house isn't for sale." Sarah smiled politely. Actually, sir, it was for sale. Your father listed it Monday, I made an offer Tuesday, and we closed this afternoon. I have the deed right here." She held up the official document, county seal gleaming. "You have until tomorrow evening to remove your personal belongings. Anything left after that will be considered abandoned property." The room erupted. Guests started edging toward the door, sensing the kind of family drama that made good stories later but uncomfortable witnessing now. Lauren was crying, whether from grief or rage, I couldn't tell. Jason was making phone calls, probably to lawyers who wouldn't return his calls until Monday. But I was watching the faces of the people who'd known me for years. Mrs. Henderson, who'd borrowed my ladder more times than I could count. Bob, who'd sold me hardware for 3 decades of projects. The Johnsons from across the street, who'd watched me rebuild this porch after the hurricane. They were seeing the truth now. Not the confused old man who needed managing, but the father who'd been betrayed by his own son. "This isn't revenge," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is restoration. Setting things back to true." A door that's hung true closes without effort. So did this one. The Ruth Monroe Educational Trust was established the following Monday with $400,000 in assets and a mission statement that would have made my wife proud, to support students pursuing traditional crafts, fine arts, and vocational skills that honor the dignity of work and the legacy of American craftsmanship. I met with the community college's development director, an earnest young man named Daniel Brooks who understood immediately what Ruth would have wanted. The first scholarships would go to students studying carpentry, metalwork, ceramics, and textile arts, the kind of skills that created beauty and utility in equal measure. We'll call them Ruth Monroe Craftsman Scholarships, Daniel said. Full tuition plus tool allowances for students who demonstrate both skill and character. Character, I repeated. That's the important part. My new apartment was smaller than the house but larger than room 237. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that looked out on a garden, and most importantly, a workshop space in the basement where the scent of cedar could linger again. Sarah had offered me a good deal on the rent, former homeowner's discount, she called it with a smile. Emily helped me move my few belongings from Sunset Manor. She'd quit her job there the day after the housewarming party, disgusted by how the administration had handled my situation. They knew, she said, loading Ruth's rocking chair into her truck. The whole staff knew you didn't belong there, but they needed the bed occupied for insurance purposes. What will you do now? I home health care. Help people stay in their own homes as long as possible. She secured the chair with moving straps, treating it like the treasure it was. Seems like there's a need for that kind of service. I gave her my grandfather's plane as a going-away present. Not because she was a carpenter, but because she understood the difference between sharp tools and true tools. For your new business, I said. Something to remind you that the best work happens when you measure twice and cut once. The hardest part was the silence from Jason. No calls, no visits, no acknowledgement that his father existed. Lauren had tried once, a tearful voicemail about misunderstandings and family healing, but I could hear the calculation behind the emotion. They were hoping I'd relent, change my mind, restore their inheritance. But legacy isn't something you inherit. It's something you build, choice by choice, day by day, until the work of your hands outlasts the beating of your heart. The first Ruth Monroe Scholarship went to a 19-year-old named Hannah Reed who wanted to learn traditional woodworking but couldn't afford the tools or tuition. I met her at the awards ceremony, saw the hunger in her eyes that I recognized from my own youth, the need to create something lasting with your own hands. What do you want to build? I asked her. Everything, she said. Furniture, cabinets, maybe houses someday. My grandfather was a carpenter in Mexico, but he never got to teach me before he died. I thought about grandfathers and legacies, about skills passed down and traditions preserved. Would you like to learn some things he might have taught you? Her smile was bright as fresh pine shavings. Chapter 12: What Legacy Really Means. 6 months later, I was in my workshop teaching Hannah how to cut dovetail joints when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the voice was familiar. Dad? It's Jason. I set down my chisel and walked to the window, looking out at the garden where tomatoes were growing in neat rows. Son. Die. His voice cracked like greenwood under stress. I wanted to apologize. For everything. The nursing home, the house, the way I treated you. Okay. That's it? Just okay? I thought about the months of silence, the anger I'd carried and finally set down, the peace that came from building something new instead of mourning something lost. What else do you want me to say? I don't know. That you forgive me? That we can fix this? Jason, forgiveness isn't something I give you. It's something I give myself. And fixing requires both people to admit something's broken. He was quiet for a long moment. I know it's broken, Dad. I know what we did was wrong. Lauren and we're in counseling now. Trying to figure out how we became people who could do that to family. That's good. That's a start. Would you be willing to meet? Maybe for coffee? I know I don't deserve it, but... Desert's got nothing to do with it, I interrupted. You're my son. That doesn't change because you made bad choices. We met the following Saturday at a diner downtown, neutral ground where neither of us had history. Jason looked older, grayer around the temples, wearing jeans instead of his usual corporate armor. He ordered coffee black and stared at it like it might provide answers. I keep thinking about that rocking chair, he said finally. The one you made for Mom. I remember sitting in it when I was little, her reading to me while you worked in the shop. It's in my apartment now. Still rocks true. I'm glad. He looked up and for a moment I saw the boy who used to hand me nails and ask endless questions about grain and glue. Dad, I don't know how to fix what I broke. You don't fix it. You build something new. I stirred sugar into my coffee, watching it dissolve like old resentments. Son, legacy isn't about what you leave behind. It's about what you build while you're here. The choices you make, the people you help, the work you do with your own hands. The scholarship fund. I heard about it. That's what Mom would have wanted. That's what Mom would have built herself if she'd had the chance. We talked for 2 hours. Not about the house or the money or the legal battles that had finally ended with restraining orders and criminal charges dropped. We talked about Ruth, about memories that mattered more than square footage, about the difference between inheritance and legacy. When we parted ways in the parking lot, Jason hesitated. Dad, would it be okay if I visited sometime? Maybe learn some of those things you tried to teach me when I was young and stupid. I thought about Hannah, bent over her workbench with the concentration of someone discovering their calling. About the other scholarship recipients who'd started coming by the workshop, hungry to learn skills their schools had forgotten to teach. About the difference between building something and creating something. Wood remembers, son. So do I. But hands can learn new patterns, even old hands. That evening, I sat in Ruth's rocking chair and watched the sun set through my apartment window. The scent of cedar drifted up from the workshop below, where tomorrow I'd teach Hannah how to plane a board smooth enough to reflect light. Next week, I'd show the new scholarship recipient how to hang a door that would never sag, never stick, never fail to close true. This is what I've learned in 75 years of building things. Legacy isn't what you leave behind when you die. Legacy is what you build while you're alive. It's the skills you pass on, the kindness you show, the work you do with your own hands that outlasts the beating of your heart. It's the choice to restore instead of revenge, to create instead of destroy, to measure twice and cut once, away from the rot, toward the grain that runs true. Dignity and legacy outlast convenience and greed. Every time. Without exception. If this story meant something to you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about people who refuse to be counted out. And tell me in the comments, what legacy are you building with your own hands? Wood remembers. So do I. So will you.